What is going to decide the remaining roster spots for the Buffalo Bills? I have plenty of thoughts to share today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino from the Draft Network, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Happy Thursday to you, and thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day. And as a reminder to you, we are free and available for you on all platforms, including YouTube. This episode is brought to you by BriteCo Jewelry and Watch Insurance. BriteCo brings you comprehensive, fast, and affordable jewelry insurance for as low as $5 per month. Check out your special offer for Locked On listeners and get covered in under 2 minutes at brite.co/locked on. That's brite.co/locked on. All right, folks, the Bills have some big time decisions to make regarding the bottom of the roster and several positions that I think are unsettled that could be settled on Friday night against the Carolina Panthers. And so I really want to offer some good analysis today on what I think is going to play into these very critical final few spots on the roster. I'm talking about the Quentin Morris versus Tommy Sweeney versus O.J. Howard battle. I'm talking receivers when you look at the Jamison Crowder, Isaiah Hodgins, Jake Kumar conundrum, all that stuff, the last few spots on the offensive line, that last spot at linebacker. I'm going to dig into all of it with some really detailed thoughts into what the factors are that will make that decision for Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott. Real quick, though, I do want to mention and remind you that the Bills do play the Panthers Friday night in Charlotte. And if you're going to be in town, would love to meet you. I'm going to be at Tavern at the Tracks. It's in Uptown Charlotte, not far from the stadium. I'm going to be there from 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. Stop by, say hello, nothing super formal. I'm going to be wearing this. I wore this today on the podcast so that you guys could see what I'm going to have on. This red Bills hat, this shirt. This is what I look like. Come say hello Friday, 3 to 5. I'll be at Tavern at the Tracks ahead of the Bills and Panthers game. All right, so we have now learned from Sean McDermott that the starters will not play against Carolina, including Josh Allen. He said most starters, so I guess maybe there could be a few. But most starters will not play Friday against Carolina, including Josh Allen. Carolina is playing their starters, and our expectation is that they're going to play at least a quarter. Matt Rule came out and said that Baker Mayfield, who they've now named their starting quarterback, will play into the second quarter. So we're going to see the Bills' backups against the Carolina Panthers starters, and I think that's a great thing. I think that's a really good thing. Great opportunity for these Bills backups to get meaningful playing time and for the bottom of the roster guys to really show what they can do. And with the starters for the Bills not playing, this is going to be front and center. And so I think there are several spots in this roster that positions, right? Like guys are going to make the roster based on Friday night. And Brandon Beane gave us a great quote, and you're going to hear me say this quote a lot throughout this discussion today because this is what's going to go into sorting out these roster spots. Brandon Beane said, if you're not starting, you need to be good on special teams, and if it's close, we're going to err towards a guy who's a dominant 3 or 4 phase special teams player. Sean and I are very much in line that we want to be good on fourth down and in all the phases of teams. If you're not going to start, you need to be good on special teams. And if it's close, we're going to err towards a guy who's a dominant 3 or 4 phase special teams player. Brandon Beane told you the answer to the test. There it is. So now let's apply that to these remaining position battles that I think are unsettled, that will be settled by early next week, with obviously a big part of that decision being what happens Friday night against Carolina Panthers. Let's start by talking about the tight end position. You have Quentin Morris, Tommy Sweeney, and O.J. Howard competing for 2 spots behind Dawson Knox. Now, listen, I want you to stick through to the end today because once I get to the last point, there's a big kind of tie-in that I think is really, really important. But I do believe that you have Quentin Morris, Tommy Sweeney, and O.J. Howard competing for 2 spots behind Dawson Knox. So let's look at each one of these players. Now, Quentin Morris, we talk about special teams, right? You're not going to be the starter. Dawson Knox is the starter. If you're not the starter, you have to play teams. Well, Quentin Morris has played the most special team snaps of any player for the Buffalo Bills so far this preseason with 26 snaps on special teams. Tommy Sweeney has played the third most amount of special team snaps at 22. That's pretty significant. How many has O.J. Howard played? None. None at all. And when I was at practice for 2 days a couple of weeks ago, O.J. Howard, when the Bills were working on special teams, O.J. Howard wasn't a part of that at all. O.J. Howard was with Dawson Knox working on the jugs machine and going through footwork as in run blocking with Rob Boris, the Bills tight ends coach. The Bills aren't even thinking about O.J. Howard on special teams. And for O.J. Howard's career, he's only played 15 special team snaps. That's it. 15 special team snaps that weren't on the field goal team. 14 on kick return, 1 on punt return. The depth players have to play special teams. O.J. Howard doesn't. Ken Dorsey on Tuesday, what did he say about O.J. Howard? Bills offensive coordinator Ken Dorsey. He said this: I think O.J. has done a heck of a job, and those 3 guys are working their tail off and really putting them in a position to make things very tough on all the decision makers here. This is what Ken Dorsey said on O.J. Howard not being on the field with Josh Allen in the Denver game. He said, honestly, it's just the way it panned out and the way the game was called in that first drive. We were trying to mix and match guys and give them opportunities in different personnel groupings. So just based off of that one drive, the personnel groupings that were called weren't OJ's. It's no fault of OJ's. It's just the way the game was called. My biggest goal was to make sure Josh felt comfortable and get him in rhythm first and foremost. So you want to get your quarterback in rhythm. You want to get him comfortable. That was the entire objective of playing him for that drive against Denver. And doing that, achieving that, did not include O.J. Howard. You tried to mix and match guys, give them opportunities with different personnel groupings, but none of that involved O.J. Howard when your number one objective was to get Josh Allen comfortable and get him in rhythm. That's pretty friggin' telling. Now, I've said repeatedly that O.J. Howard offers a lot as a blocker, and the receiving piece of what the tight end 2 is going to offer is pretty minimal. We're talking 20, 30, 35 targets maybe on the season, hundreds of snaps of blocking. So I definitely keep that at the forefront, but as I piece together the information, what Brandon Beane said, what Ken Dorsey said, what the special teams background is of these players, it doesn't necessarily add up favorably for O.J. Howard. Let's move on to a few more comments here. Josh Allen. This is what Josh Allen said about Tommy Sweeney. I think this is the strongest camp I've been around, what he's been able to do. Tommy, he's one of the smartest guys in the room. He knows the playbook inside and out, knows where he needs to be, and in the locker room, everybody loves him. Strong endorsement from QB1, right? This is what Ken Dorsey said about Tommy Sweeney. It's a real testament to Tommy with how much he's worked and everything we've kind of challenged him with. He's really responded and really taking that next step to continue to grow as a player. I think he's done a tremendous job in terms of that. and his growth and his desire to get better. And I'm really excited with the strides he has made. I mean, it's really substantial. Pretty telling quote there from Ken Dorsey. How about what Sean McDermott said this week on Quentin Morris? He said, he's athletic, and when you turn the film on, you see he's able to bend, can block in line. He can flex out and do some things as a receiver, as you saw this past weekend as well. I thought he blocked well at times. He got the penalty down there in the red zone against Denver. I think it was before the half that cost us a little bit there, but he'll learn from that, and he continues to come every day prepared to work and with a great attitude. What does that tell you? I think Tommy Sweeney and Quentin Morris have a very real opportunity to stiff arm O.J. Howard and put him on the outside looking in when it comes to this roster. Now, look, maybe O.J. Howard makes this roster, but I think I had very good process here to tell you why I think there's a path that he just might not. Folks, you've all seen those videos on the internet of guys proposing and then the ring falls off of the bridge and into the water or into the ocean, or maybe you've lost a ring or some type of jewelry. You don't want to be that guy, and you certainly don't want it splattered all over the internet. The guys at BriteCo Jewelry Insurance will make sure you get a replacement for the full value of that ring, no matter if it's lost, stolen, or you just can't figure out what happened to it. Go to brite.co/locked on. It's the fastest, easiest, and cheapest way to cover your butt with the best jewelry insurance in the business. These guys at BriteCo are geniuses. They made buying insurance for your engagement ring, your watch, or whatever so friggin' easy, you can get it covered in minutes on your cell phone. You won't find a better deal on great coverage that's super affordable. Brite.co/locked on. We all hate insurance, right? These guys at BriteCo turned the whole experience around, so it's probably the easiest thing you can do for yourself this week. No excuses. For $5 a month, you can get totally comprehensive coverage, and it won't take you more than 2 minutes on your cell phone. Check it out, brite.co/locked on. You have to see their videos. BriteCo has a bunch of these hilarious videos that you can see for yourself at brite.co/locked on. Let's move past the tight end position, talk wide receiver. I'm of the belief that the Bills will keep 6 receivers. Diggs, Davis, McKenzie, Shakir. I think those 4 guys are absolute roster locks. And then I think you have Jake Kumar, Isaiah Hodgins, and Jamison Crowder in contention for the last 2 spots. Now, that doesn't get into Marquez Stevenson, who has a foot injury, Neil Pau'u, and Tanner Gentry. I don't know that those 2 guys have a real path to making this roster. Marquez Stevenson, the foot injury certainly complicates things. So let's look at Kumar, Hodgins, and Crowder. 2 guys competing for 3 spots, in my opinion. The case for Jamison Crowder is pretty clear. He's a veteran, proven slot receiver in the NFL, and I kept on telling you all off season long how he's a younger and more productive player than Cole Beasley was when he came to Buffalo. Now, he did miss some practice time, but he's had a chance to make that up over the last few weeks. So I think it's pretty clear what Jamison Crowder offers this team. I'm a little bit more concerned about what he doesn't offer this team. He's played 0 special team snaps this preseason and basically none in his career where he wasn't a returner. And we know he's not getting opportunities to serve as a returner for the Bills. So my question here is, will the Bills roster a backup slot receiver that doesn't offer any value on special teams? All right. So I asked the question, will the Bills roster a backup slot receiver that doesn't offer any value on special teams? The answer to the question's already been given to us by Brandon Beane. Brandon Beane said, if you're not starting, you need to be good on special teams. And if it's close, we're going to err towards a guy who's dominant in 3 or 4 phases of special teams. That's the problem with Crowder. Let's move on to Jake Kumar. What is he? The first thing that you're going to say about Jake Kumar is that he's a proven special teams player in the NFL. There's no question about it. He's been a 4-phase special teams player for the last several years in the NFL and for the Buffalo Bills specifically. You've heard Sean McDermott refer to him as a glue guy and a big part of who they are as a football team. He adds size, he adds blocking ability to the offense, and that blocking ability is something that's important. You saw them tap into that last year, and this year you're seeing the Bills use wide receivers as insert blockers. That's happened in preseason games. It's happened in practice, where they're using these receivers not only to block on the perimeter, but coming down into the trenches to serve as an insert blocker. So it's pretty obvious, like when you talk about wide receiver 6, this is what it is, right? Kind of a skill set that provides some value on offense, but a clear path to helping on special teams. I'm of the expectation that Jake Kumar is going to make this roster based on the way they've talked about him, based on what he's proven in Buffalo, and the fact that he's a consistent high-level four-phase special teams player and has been not only for the Bills, but for the last several seasons in the NFL. Let's look at Isaiah Hodgins. Well, the case there is that he's young. There's been some really good flashes over the last several off seasons, and it really, this preseason and what he's done in camp has really stood out. There's been growth there. You love that he's been working with Gabriel Davis. You love that he's getting opportunities now to play some special teams. He's 10th on the team so far this preseason in special teams snaps with 17. Now that seems pretty good, but prior to this preseason, he had 2 special team snaps last year in the preseason, and literally that's it. No more in the NFL, none in college. So there's just not a profile of special teams to point to for Isaiah Hodgins. Let's go back to Brandon Beane's quote. If you're not starting, you need to be good on special teams, and if it's close, we're going to err towards a guy who's a dominant 3 or 4 phase special teams player. To me, that's literally going Jake Kumar versus Isaiah Hodgins. Which one's the dominant 3 or 4 phase special teams player? It's Kumar. Now, maybe there's enough receiving talent with Hodgins that it could force a deeper look at him, but right now I think he's on the outside looking in. Now, I know what everybody's thinking. New York Giants are going to claim him. Yeah, they probably will. They probably will. I bet if he is cut, the Giants will claim him, especially because one of their young promising receivers, Colin Johnson, was carted off practice on Wednesday as a torn Achilles. He's out for the year. And that's a 6'6" wide receiver out of Texas. Think that Brian Dable and Joe Shane wouldn't love to just scoop up Isaiah Hodgins and insert him into that role? They would. The Giants are claiming everybody. Their roster's bad. They're going to claim Hodgins. I'd be willing to guarantee it. So you're probably not going to get him back on the practice squad. So that's something the Bills will have to really think about when they're sorting this out, when they're asking themselves who they want to roster and who they think they can get back on the practice squad. To me, that leads to a thought in my head about trading him. And I don't know what the trade value of Isaiah Hodgins could be, given what he's done in the NFL, right? A very light NFL resume, pretty much non-existent, and being a 6th-round pick in 2020. But it's worth exploring in my mind. I know Brandon Beane has Joe Shane's phone number. Call him up and say, hey, look, 6th-round pick, 7th-round pick, something like that. Or do you keep 7 receivers? And I think there's a path to that, which I will get to towards the end of the show. But I think those are the dynamics in play when sorting out Crowder, Kumar, Hodgins, keeping 2 of the 3. I think it's a really interesting dynamic. To me, the most obvious, based on history, based on what Beane has told us, Kumar. So then it becomes Crowder versus Hodgins. Well, I'd say Hodgins probably offers you more on teams. Crowder offers you more as a receiver. I don't know that I have a prediction here, but I think those are the dynamics to be aware of when sorting out these players at receiver. Let's look at running back. I think they're going to keep 4 running backs. Devin Singletary, James Cook, and Tywan Jones are roster locks, in my opinion. So you have 1 spot for Zach Moss, Duke Johnson, and Rahim Blackshear. Let's talk about those dynamics. Zach Moss has played no special team snaps this preseason. Literally none. Literally none ever. None in college, none in the NFL previously. He does bring a short yardage skill set and pass blocking ability. And it's also worth noting that he's a fairly recent third-round pick, right? He's a third-round pick on a rookie contract. I mean, the short yardage skill set, that's different than anyone else in that running back room. The pass blocking, the draft pick, that could be enough for him to stick. But as a player that's a niche back for you, that has no special teams appeal, that's somewhat of a tough pill to swallow. Rahim Blackshear, he's been the darling of the preseason. Undrafted free agent out of Virginia Tech. He's played 14 special team snaps so far this season, which is 13th most on the team. He has no real special teams experience in college outside of some opportunities as a returner. I like his potential as a special teams player. I've commented on that a lot, even before the preseason when I was at camp. It was something that stood out to me. I think he could be a good special teams player. But ultimately, he's proven very little. And there's a redundancy with his skill set that you already have kind of in Devin Singletary. Doesn't give you short yardage appeal. I mean, he's a sub 200-pound back. So I think he's got a tough path. I think he needs help. I think he needs injuries to get on this roster. And then there's Duke Johnson. He's played 17 special team snaps this preseason, 10th most on the team. Very little special teams experience outside of return opportunities in his NFL career, which he's done some kick return for the Bills. I think the Bills would love to have him and Blackshear back on the practice squad, but barring injury, I think it's going to be Singletary, Cook, Moss, and Jones as your 4 Bills running backs. Let's look at the offensive line. I think the Bills will keep 9 of those. Dawkins, Saffold, Morse, Bates, Quessenberry, and Brown are roster locks. That's 6 players. I think Tommy Doyle and Greg Mance are pretty close to locks. That would be 8. So then you have 1 spot for Greg Van Roaten or Bobby Hart. And I don't see a path for Luke Tenuta, Jacob Capra, Tanner Owen, or Alec Anderson. So I think you have literally a Greg Van Roaten versus Bobby Hart conversation to be the 9th offensive lineman for the Buffalo Bills. Bobby Hart, he's an experienced player. He's a 4-hole backup. Sean McDermott commented on him Thursday morning and said he's improved immensely. Said he's done a tremendous job and is improving and believes he's played his best football of his career in Buffalo. Then you have Greg Van Roaten, also an experienced player. Greg Van Roaten has over 50 starts in the league. Bobby Hart has over 60. Greg Van Roaten can play all 3 interior spots, but not tackle. He gives you center depth and guard depth. So that leads me to the question of what does the Bills' center depth look like outside of Greg Van Roaten? Well, you have Mitch Morse. You have Ryan Bates that can play center. You have Greg Mans that can play center. And then potentially at some point you can have Ike Bucker who can play center as well. So you have a decent amount of guys that can come in and snap. So I think what this comes down to, Greg Van Roaten versus Bobby Hart, I think it comes down to, do the Bills want the extra tackle depth or do they want the center depth? Do they feel like they like the combination of Quessenberry, Brown, Dawkins, Doyle as your tackle answers? Or do they need Hart to feel better about that? And then same thing on the interior offensive line. Do they like, Quessenberry's played some guard. You've seen Tommy Doyle play some guard. Obviously, Greg Mans can help you there. Do you feel like you need Greg Van Roaten? Oh, by the way, Bobby Hart can also play guard. So it really comes down to tackle versus center. I think if they're both going to play a lot on Friday night, I think this is Bobby Hart's job to lose. As you gear up for fall, you need the right people on your team to help your small business fire on all cylinders. LinkedIn Jobs is here to make it easier for you to find the people you want to talk to faster and for free. You can create a free job post in minutes on LinkedIn Jobs to reach your network and beyond to the world's largest professional network of over 810 million people. Then add your job and the purple hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring so your network can help you find the right people to hire. LinkedIn has simple tools like screening questions to make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. Did you know every week nearly 40 million job seekers visit LinkedIn? Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, we got a few more position groups to get to. And again, there's kind of an important item that I want to get to at the end. Defensive end, I think you do have a battle. Defensive end 4 and 5, I think they both make the team. But Boogie Basham and Shaq Lawson, which one's going to be 4? Which one's going to be 5? And that's significant because I think defensive end 5 won't be an active game day player. However, I do think the Bills could be matchup specific with those players. If you're playing a run-heavy team, you might want to go with Shaq Lawson. If you're going against a pass-heavy team and you want more fresh bodies to rush, I think you might want Boogie Basham. So I don't know if there's a whole lot to say there other than sorting that out is something that I think still needs to happen. Linebacker. This is interesting to me. I think the Bills will likely keep 6 of them. Edmonds, Milano, Terrell Bernard, they're roster locks to me. Tyrell Dodson and Tyler Matakevich feels like they are safe to me. That gets you to 5. So you have 1 spot remaining for Joe Giles-Harris or Balin Spector. Now, Balin Spector, he's played the second most special teams so far this preseason for the team at 24. Joe Giles-Harris not far behind with 19. I think Spector has the upper hand as a draft pick, and because he has a far more dynamic athletic profile, I think that's going to help him, right? The athleticism, the youth, the fact that he is a draft pick. Meanwhile, Joe Giles-Harris, he has played 104 special team snaps during the NFL regular season, and that's pretty significant over the last 4 seasons, including a fair amount of time last year for the Bills when he wasn't even on the roster, right? A guy they call up off the practice squad and trust to go play special teams. I think that's significant. I think Joe Giles-Harris has appeal as a true Mike linebacker, and I think he's definitely a practice squad lock. But I think the Bills could look at Andre Smith coming back from a suspension after 6 games, that they kind of have a hedge against losing Joe Giles-Harris' skill set. And again, kind of push them towards the younger, more dynamic athlete that is a draft pick. So the proven player would be Giles-Harris, right? He's played teams in the NFL. The Bills are going to value that. But I like Balin Spector's projection to teams. I like his athleticism. And I like the fact that if you go with Balin Spector, that you still have, of course, Tyrell Dodson and Terrell Bernard as backups, but you also have Andre Smith available to you after 6 games. Now let's talk about corners, and this is where I think things get really interesting to me in terms of the possibilities. I think there's 3 scenarios for the Bills at corner, 3 of them. Now, the first one is that Trey White is activated and starts the season on the active roster. If that's the case, this is very straightforward. I think it's Trey White, Taron Johnson, Dane Jackson, Saron Neal, Kyer Elam, Christian Benford. Straightforward. That's scenario number 1. Scenario number 2 is that Trey White starts a season on the active PUP list and comes back after 4 games, so he doesn't count against the 53, and you wind up rostering Taron Johnson, Dane Jackson, Saron Neal, Kyer Elam, Christian Benford. There's your 5, plus 1 more, which would be either Cam Lewis or Nick McLeod. So that's option number 2. Scenario number 3, and this is where I think things can be interesting. Trey White's on the PUP. You have Johnson, Jackson, Neal, Elam, and Benford. So 5 corners, and maybe you don't feel compelled to keep a 6. Maybe you don't feel compelled to keep Cam Lewis or Nick McLeod, and you go back to some of these other conversations that we just had. Maybe you want to keep all 3 of those receivers. Maybe you want to keep one of those running backs. Maybe that's the spot for Blackshear. Maybe that's the spot for Isaiah Hodgins. Maybe that's the spot for Greg Van Roaten. Maybe that's the spot for Joe Giles-Harris and Balin Spector. I think that's where the Bills catch themselves a little bit of an opportunity to go a little heavier at a position. Go with 5 corners, Johnson, Jackson, Neal, Elam, Benford, knowing that Trey White's coming back in 4 weeks, and then keep a 7th receiver, keep a 10th offensive lineman, keep a 5th running back. I think that's where there could be some opportunity. And that's why I wanted you to stick around to the end, because I think that's an important caveat for this entire conversation. I've studied this roster long enough. I know the tendencies. I know the numbers that they like at each position. But you have a unique opportunity here with Trey White. Now, look, I think we all could agree that scenario number 1's the best. Trey White's on the active roster. You have him, Johnson, Jackson, Neal, Elam, Benford. Go play ball. But if he's not going to be ready, there's your crutch. Looking forward to Friday night. If you're going to be in town, we'd love for you to stop by Tavern at the Tracks from 3 to 5 p.m. ahead of Bills Panthers. Our next conversation will come post-game. So after the Bills and Panthers play and I get back home, I'll be back here in this office. I'll record the podcast and get it out to you. It'll be, late, right? The game's at 7. I'll probably be back, 11, 12 o'clock. We'll get to recording. We'll get this thing published for you. And so if you stay up late, it'll be there for you. Otherwise, it'll be there for you first thing Saturday morning. So make sure that you're subscribed. We'd love it if you took a second to rate, review, and share the podcast. Have a great rest of your day, and I look forward to catching up with you again after the game.